Forms are not necessarily required for processing, but it is recommended that staff process through a form rather than through the table or on the table. Forms also can facilitate how you see the information and allow for buttons. Right now we're going to use the form wizard to build a form for the applications table. I like the form wizard for this particular piece because if we build the fields at the right size, it tends to make the fields about the right size instead of having to struggle with making them the right size for yourself. Some of the fields are not going to go on the regular processing form. These fields would be the address fields, so we can move those back after moving all of them. I moved all of them over with the double arrow first because I knew I was going to keep most of the fields. The other fields we're not going to use is the process time, and I'm going to save these for a different form or for a different project, which I will post a video about, but we're not going to go over that in this session. I'm going to keep the columnar. Tabular looks more like a table. Datasheet is exactly like a table, and Justified can look kind of like a banner form, but I find columnar has been the easiest to read. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm just going to call the form applications. And it's compiling that for us. And it did a pretty good job because we had right-sized our fields pretty well. You'll see drop-down arrows for options that have more than one option. And you'll see checkboxes for our yes/no fields. Now I'm kind of a space hog, so I'm going to move that over, and then I'm going to go into Design View and show you how I would move some things. Right now I don't need the field list because I've carefully constructed my table beforehand. Most people's monitors are larger, but you'll have to decide what are wider than they used to be. You'll have to decide what kind of space your staff have when you decide where you're going to put the fields. So I'm going to move these bottom 3 checkbox fields over, just because I think there's plenty of space here to do that. And I'm going to be adding in another field soon. You can use your arrow keys to right space that. You can use the control arrow key to do micro spacing. Sometimes it's easier to see if it's spaced correctly when you unselect. I can still see that dotted line up there, so I'm going to micro space back up 1, and now I can't see it, which looks to be about the same as the other fields. Some of these fields, like applicant name, we made it 75 characters, so it's kind of making the field a little wide. If you want to make sure your fields are the same height, you can go to the Arrange and Size and Space and say you want it to go to the tallest, because I could tell it was a little bit shorter. And then I'm going to need to move all of these fields up. And I really think the email address will be fine also with that same height, so I'm going to go to the size space again and say to shortest. And then I'm going to move all of these fields up. And actually, I'm going to stop right there. So even though the space thing's mostly the way I wanted, I'm going to move them around a little bit. And for this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and move these as well. And you get the idea. I decided I wanted to move the reason over and up. So I'm going to move it enough over that now I can get it up to where I want, and then I can use the align to top, and it will bring it to be aligned with that at the top. Now I also want to re-space this, and actually part of the reason I'm bringing this over is the reason is really very long, and so I'd like to be able to include that length. So then I'm going to select those and move them over with just eyeing it. And unclick, and it looks about right. I'm going to move these down because, as I said, actually, I'm going to move this one up. So we're going to use that align to top again. And I'm going to move these down. You can't align two fields to bottom or top together because it will try and align them both to the same space. It's not smart enough to think you want to move both fields together with the bottom one to the bottom or the top one to the top, depending on what you're using. Then what I could do is I could now align this one to the bottom, and I could align this one to that bottom, and I can align this one to that bottom. And you may want to make this field bigger. And I like to put in our logo, so I'm going to delete that, go to Design View and enter logo, which I have in my pictures. And then I'm going to I took away that other field because it's not the right size. And you can go into Format to change the font after you deselect the box. And then I can drag this up to give me a little bit better space. I also want to move all that closer. So Control A, I can select all the fields, and then using my Shift key or my Control key, I can deselect those two, and then I'm just going to move these. Otherwise, it would move that. The other thing is this field is too long, and we're going to place a button for our process. Buttons are really fun. For our button, there's going to be two processes. One of them is going to be to run that unmatched query. So we're going to run query, and we're going to append those records. And actually, we're going to also add an import and append. And it assigns a random number, just so you can change that, though, to be append import. And then we want to actually assign some additional code. And I happen to know what this code is. It's run menu command. And then the menu command that we want is import. It's going to select a saved import. Saved import. And that's actually the first one I want to do. So there's this little arrow that will pop up if I hover over here. And then the other thing is, after this action, I want to remove warnings. And I actually don't remember where that is. Let's see, macro commands, system commands. It may be under other actions that are not showing. So I click the show all actions. Set warnings. So I can add that under the system commands and say, no, I don't want the warnings on. And that way when it's running this query here, it won't ask me whether I really want to do the steps. Because I clicked the button, I know that I do. Okay, so we're going to close this and go back. And I'm sorry if that was a little bit quick, but we're short on time. So we're going to go back to the form view. And here you'll see now there are 22 records. A lot of times you have to close and open the form to be able to see that, but I truncated the step. I realized that a couple of other things that would be helpful then would be to close and open the form. So we're going to go back into Design View, and we're going to build event. And we're going to add a couple of more options. One will be close window, and then we're going to select from this object list a form because that's what we're doing. Then we're going to select applications, and then we also want to open a form, and the form we want to open again is applications, and we want to view it in the form, and we don't want any filters. The other thing I added was this hourglass, and I think that should go before the warnings, but I'm still figuring that out. And that way we'll know that the query is running. So let's go back in here, and I had purposely deleted 2 records so that we could run through this import one more time. And I apologize for how quickly this is going, but these videos will be available to you so you can rewind and rewatch the steps. So after I close that, oh, it's closed the form and reopened it so fast you couldn't even tell that now there are 24 records.